Hello everyone, I am Khaled Abdulati and I want you to think of a small question. Is it logical or rational to do something that will benefit you in the short run, but you know for sure that it has consequences that will accumulate and destroy all the benefits you received on the long run? Seems illogical, right? But today I'm going to show you that most countries in the world are doing that through presenting my research on the long-term effects on the global economy of prioritizing economic development over climate change. So here is the outline of my presentation, starting with what is climate change? What is the definition of that problem? We hear that terminology in the news. We hear about global conferences and protocols relating to it. So what is it and what are the causes and effects of that problem? And since it's a global problem, what is the global response? What the global community have done to face that problem, and is that response effective or not? And finally, the consequences of continuing climate change on the global economy. To start with, climate is the average range of weather conditions for a specific region, including temperature, humidity, wind speed, average amount of rainfall, and so on. And recently, the global climate has been changing due to human activities, and it's said that we are now in the Anthropocene, which is the era of the human. We can see from the charts here that the concentration of carbon dioxide and methane gases started to rise dramatically since 1750, which remarks the start of the Industrial Revolution. So what is the relation between the concentration of these gases, climate change, and the Industrial Revolution? So those two gases, along with other gases, are called the greenhouse gases. They trap Earth, the temperature inside Earth's atmosphere, causing its temperature to rise. And this what mainly causes climate change. So where do these gases come from, which is the causes of climate change? So firstly, the exhausts from industry, agriculture, and transportation, from burning fossil fuels, from cattle, from using fertilizers. We can see in the pie chart here the annual greenhouse emissions by sector. And secondly is deforestation. So the forests we have contribute to decreasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere through absorbing huge amounts of it. But deforestation is the permanent removal of forests for economic purposes, agricultural, cattle ranching, mining, obtaining wood, and constructing roads. And recently, in just the past few decades, the world lost 1.3 million square kilometers of forests from the Amazon, from tropical forests, and this contributes to the increase of greenhouse gases concentrations in the atmosphere. So what are the effects of the climate change problem? Firstly, the average atmospheric temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius above industrial levels, and by industrial levels, I mean the average atmospheric temperature before the start of the Industrial Revolution. So 1.1 degrees may seem a small number, but actually smaller changes in the average atmospheric temperature can have catastrophic effects. For example, the difference in the average atmospheric temperature between now and the last ice age was about 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. And this increase in the atmospheric temperature causes more evaporation from water bodies and land, leading to more precipitation. This leads to floods in some areas and drought waves in other areas. We have a change may occur in the climate belts as climate warms worldwide. And finally, we have the melting of glaciers and ice sheets, and this raises the sea level. So we have seen that it's really a huge problem. So how the world and the global community reacted to that problem? So actually, we have many protocols, global agreements, and summits trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and trying to adapt to the current situation of the global climate and trying to stop the average atmospheric temperature at 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level. So we have, for example, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, 2019 Climate Action Summit. But actually, most of these global efforts fail to achieve the desired goals. But why? Firstly, because of lack of awareness. And when I'm talking about lack of awareness, I mean about among the public and among the politicians. So firstly, among the public, so actually most of the people in both developed and developing countries are not aware of the problem and its consequences. So they are much more interested in short-term economic development rather than economic policies that will help solving the problem of climate change. And actually, many people think that weather conditions are something that comes from nature or from God, which is something that we have no control on it, and which is something that is not affected by our actions. So it's not expected that the public will blame the economic policies on having extreme weather conditions. No one, for example, will blame the current politicians and economists for having a heat wave in 2035, for example. But actually, they will blame them when the prices goes up now because of following a long-term eco-friendly economic policy. And on the side of politicians, we have some politicians do not recognize climate change as a real problem. We have all seen U.S. President Donald Trump pulling off Paris Agreement, excluding the U.S., which is the second producer of greenhouse gases in the world from the agreement that primarily intended to decrease greenhouse gases. So we have the public attitude and the way politicians think that leads us to the second point. So the public, as I said, are much more interested in short-term economic development rather than caring about the effects on the climate on the long run. So they push politicians towards economic policies that have short-term benefits and completely disregarding the effects these plans might have on the climate change. One example for that is that countries try to attract foreign direct investments, and these foreign direct investments are most probably in the form of multinational corporations building their factories on their lands. And the activities of these multinational corporations are among the greatest producers of greenhouse gases emissions. And actually, when a country hosting the activities of multinational corporations tend to increase their environmental regulations, trying to stop climate change, these corporations tend not to stick to the rules and modify their activities to be more suitable for the new regulations. Rather, according to the pollution heavens theory, they tend to move their activities from this country to another one which has less strict rules or even no environmental rules. So many countries trying to attract the investments from multinational corporations, which has positive effect on their economy. They tend to keep their environmental regulations as they are, or even make them less strict. And this indicates the existence of economic short-sightedness, as these countries and these governments are more concerned with, as I said, short-term economic development and completely disregarding the effect these policies and practices have on the global climate. So finally, what are the consequences of continuing climate change on the global economy? For developing countries, the effects are very severe since these countries are more reliant on climate sensitive sectors such as agriculture. So the continuation of climate change and its effects will lead to a drop in the incomes in these developing countries. It will also cause a rise in health problems, and there will be a great losses in GDP, which is going to be up to 9 to 13% compared to an economy without climate change. For developed countries, the effects are less severe, but still detrimental. We have extreme weather conditions, most likely to cause GDP losses. They are less than those in developing countries, but they are still a problem. And heat waves will be more common in Europe, which will hugely affect the agricultural sector there. And finally, these conditions also affect the world trade negatively. So the extreme weather conditions destroy crops, goods, and infrastructure. This disrupts the global supply chain. So we have seen that climate change is a real problem. We know what causes it and what are the huge effects of it, and we know that our response to that problem is not sufficient, and that continuing what we are doing will negatively affect us in the future. So this takes us to the question I asked you at the very beginning. Is it rational to only care about short-term economic development and disregard the effect these policies and these economic activities have on the climate change? At the same time, we know that climate change will eventually destroy all the economic development we have built along these years. Seems not, right? So that was my presentation. Thank you all for listening.